I was 72 years old the day my grandson broke his silence and saved my life, and the sound of his voice hit me harder than any fall ever could. Until that moment, the kitchen was full of all the usual end of visit noises. Daniel's shoes squeaked on the tile as he hauled bags in and out. The microwave hummed, reheating the casserole my daughter-in-law had made, just for Mom's heart and blood sugar. Cabinet doors opened and shut under Kayla's brisk hands, and Eli's little plastic puzzle cube clicked softly as he twisted it in his lap, eyes glued to the colors, mouth as still as ever. "Mom, where do you want this stuff?" Daniel puffed from the hallway, arms full of bags. "She went overboard again. Just by the hall closet," I called. "I'm not running a hotel." Kayla laughed, that bright, brittle laugh she uses with waiters and nurses. "You know I can't help myself, Margaret. Somebody has to keep you on track." She swept into the kitchen, ponytail swinging, holding my old pill organizer in one hand and 2 new white bottles in the other. She'd already taken over my cabinets like she lived here, prescription labels facing out in neat little rows. "Look," she said, snapping open the plastic lids with nimble fingers. "I sorted all your meds for the weekend. Morning, lunch, evening. All you have to do is pop the right square." Her nails tapped each compartment like a teacher pointing at letters. "I've been taking pills since before you were born, Kayla," I said mildly. "I think I can manage." She didn't even glance up. "Sure. But you got dizzy last month, remember? We can't risk you mixing anything up." She shook one of the new bottles so the capsules rattled. "These are the supplements Dr. Patel and I talked about. You really need them, remember?" I'd never met a Dr. Patel. My cardiologist was Dr. Morgan, a gray-haired man who still used a paper calendar. But my eyesight isn't what it was, and the print on the label blurred when I tried to squint at it. Daniel appeared in the doorway again, already halfway out in his head. "Kay, the Uber's 5 minutes away," he said. "Eli's headphones are in the backpack, right?" "In the front pocket," she answered. "Can you check his tablet's charged? He melts down if it dies." Eli sat on the edge of the armchair by the window, spinning his cube. 9 years old and barely a word in all that time. Doctors said, nonverbal, then severe speech delay, then a string of other phrases that all meant the same thing: don't expect too much. I never stopped talking to him, though. You'd be surprised what kids pick up when people assume they don't understand. "Hey, sweetheart," I called. "You excited to have a sleepover with Grandma?" He didn't look at me. Just twisted red to green, green to yellow. His foot tapped an anxious little rhythm against the leg of the chair. Kayla clucked her tongue. "Margaret, don't wind him up," she said. "He's already dysregulated because of the change in routine." I bit back the answer on my tongue. 30 years feeding cafeteria lines had taught me when to hold my words. She pulled open my fridge, wrinkling her nose. "You've got so much sodium in here," she muttered. "Processed deli meat, real butter. No wonder your blood pressure creeps." Before I could remind her I'd lived long enough to see disco come and go, she was shuffling things around, making space. Out came a glass dish she'd brought from the car, still cool from the ice pack. "This is tonight's dinner," she said, peeling back the foil. "Turkey and vegetable casserole. No cream, no cheese, whole wheat crumbs on top. It's practically a textbook heart meal." Steam rolled up, carrying the smell of garlic and rosemary. Underneath, there was something else. Sharp, almost bitter. I told myself it was just a new kind of herb. Kayla was always talking about superfoods. She slid the dish onto my counter and set my pill organizer in the middle of the kitchen table like a centerpiece. "You'll be fine if you just do what the doctor says, Margaret," she said, straightening. "No more of your salty old lady cooking, okay?" Daniel came back in, zipping Eli's backpack. "Mom," he said, "you sure you're all right for a couple nights? We can always cancel the cabin if—" "Don't be ridiculous," I told him. "Go. Enjoy your lake and your fishing and your fancy hot tub. I can manage one skinny boy." He kissed my cheek, smelling like aftershave and printer paper. His eyes were tired. He worked too hard and saw too little, my boy. Kayla followed him to the door, then turned back to me. For the first time that afternoon, she slowed down. She stepped close and put both hands on my shoulders, fingers digging a little deeper than a friendly squeeze. "Just rest, okay?" she said quietly. "No fuss in the kitchen. Promise me." There was something in her tone that made the little hairs rise on the back of my neck. A finality. Like the way Frank had sounded when he'd said goodnight that last time, before his heart stopped. "I'll try," I said. She leaned in, brushed my cheek with a cold kiss, then spun away. A minute later, the door shut behind them. The engine started, tires crunched on gravel, and then they were gone. The house exhaled. All the noise they'd dragged in with them went with them, leaving only the hum of my ancient fridge and the ticking of the clock over the stove. I stood in the quiet for a moment, feeling my own breath in my chest. "All right, Ali," I said at last. "Let's get some supper in you." He shuffled to the table when I called, moving like a boy half asleep. I cut him a peanut butter sandwich, smooth, the way he liked, and set it on the placemat with the little ducks. Kayla didn't approve of peanut butter, but we'd survived worse. For myself, I spooned a generous square of her casserole onto a plate. The rosemary hit my nose first, then the garlic, and then that other thing again, a bitter edge, metallic like old pennies left in hot water. I told myself I was being silly, getting paranoid in my old age. I'd seen a lot of kids wrinkle their noses at new spices. Food's supposed to be fuel, not a science experiment, I used to tell the health inspectors. Still, something in my gut tightened. I opened the pill organizer. For I do a PM stared up at me in cheerful blue letters. Inside the little square sat an oblong capsule and 2 small white tablets. I tipped them into my palm. The capsule looked like any other. The tablets had a faint chalky smell. New supplements. I muttered. "Dr. Patel, huh?" My water glass was already there, sweating a little ring onto the table. I picked it up in my left hand, my fork in my right. Eli chewed methodically across from me. Eyes on his plate, cube untouched by his elbow. "Okay," I said. "Here we go." I lifted the fork to my mouth. It happened so fast my brain couldn't keep up. The chair scraped. Eli's hand shot out. Faster than I'd ever seen him move, a blur across the table. His small palm smacked my wrist with the force of a grown man. The fork flew from my hand, clattering against the table edge and spinning down to the floor. A clump of turkey and vegetables slapped against my sleeve and slid down into my lap. "Ali?" I cried. "What on earth?" I looked up, ready to pry the fork out of his twitchy fingers and tell him to use his words if something was wrong, even though he never did. But his hands were empty. His cube lay abandoned. His eyes were on mine. For the first time since he was a baby, my grandson looked straight at me. Not past me, not through me, at me. There was fear in his eyes, real fear, but also something fierce underneath it. Determination. A grown-up's kind of worry. His chest rose and fell in quick, shallow breaths. His mouth opened. For a heartbeat, nothing came out. Then I heard it. "Grandma," he said, each syllable scraping its way up from somewhere rusted. "Don't eat." The world narrowed to that cracked little voice and the warmth of the capsule sweating in my palm. I forgot about the mess on my lap, the ache in my hip. The pill organizer sitting open like a little plastic coffin. "Ali," I whispered. "Yo, you can talk." He didn't seem to hear the question. His gaze dropped to my hand, to the capsule glistening against my spotted skin. Then snapped back up to my plate. "Don't take her pills," he forced out, slower this time, as if choosing each word with care. His finger lifted, shaking, and pointed at the bottle Kayla had left on the table. "They aren't from a doctor." My stomach turned to ice. The casserole's bitter smell flooded my nose. The little white bottle's label swam in my vision. Somewhere deep inside me, the part that had counted trays and checked expiration dates for 3 decades sat bolt upright. Something was wrong. I closed my fingers around the capsule, curling my hand into a fist. Very calmly, because panic never helped anybody digest, I set my water glass back down. "All right, sweetheart," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I won't eat." He swallowed, throat bobbing, and his shoulders sagged with a tiny exhale I might have missed if I hadn't been looking right at him. "But we're not throwing this away. Either," I added, glancing at the plate, the pills, the bottle. 30 years feeding other people's children had taught me a few hard rules. You don't ignore a bad smell. You don't dismiss a scared child. And you never ever get rid of something that might be evidence. Slowly, so I wouldn't startle him, I pushed my chair back and stood up. My knees cracked, but I barely felt them. "Let's just put some of this aside," I murmured. I reached for the casserole dish with one hand, the little pill bottle with the other, and a plan, half-formed, fueled by dread, began to take root in the back of my mind. I didn't grow up thinking my own kitchen could be a crime scene. For most of my life, that room had been my kingdom, and my job was simple: keep other people's children fed and safe. I ran the cafeteria at Lincoln Elementary for 30 years. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest. I knew every allergy in that school by heart. I could tell you which kid tried to sneak extra chocolate milk, and which one hid peas in their pockets to throw out later. My hairnet and I outlasted 4 principals and 3 superintendents. When the health inspector came through, we never once failed a check. "Margaret," he used to say, stamping his clipboard with a satisfied grunt. "If every lunchroom ran like yours, I'd be out of a job." I took pride in that. The kids were always my kids, even if I had to scold them about washing their hands. If a pot smelled a little off, it didn't get served, no matter how much it cost. I trusted my nose and my gut long before any thermometer agreed. I met my husband, Frank, back when the school district still had money for auto shop. He was the young mechanic they called when the delivery truck broke down, slung under the hood with grace on his cheek, and a grin that could have lit up the whole parking lot. He fixed engines for a living and fixed everything else for love. If something in the house squeaked, leaked, or groaned, he'd tinker with it until it sang instead. We built a modest life. 1 little brick house, 1 decent car, 1 son. Daniel came late, after a few miscarriages and more prayers than I care to count. I think that's why I held him a little too tight sometimes, like he might float away if I let go. He was a sensitive boy, my Daniel. Bright as a shiny coin but soft. Hated seeing anyone upset. If 2 kids argued on the playground, he'd give up his turn to keep the peace. When he broke Mrs. Ralston's window with a baseball, he would have let his friend take the blame if I hadn't marched him over there myself. "People will walk right over you if you let them," Frank warned him more than once. "He's got a big heart," I'd say, ruffling Daniel's hair. Truth was, I shielded him too often. Called teachers to smooth things over, wrote notes for forgotten homework, baked cookies to charm his way out of trouble. Love can make you blind to the backbone your children never grow. Then Frank's heart betrayed us. 5 years ago, he went out to the garage to grab a wrench and never came back in. Sudden cardiac arrest, they said. I learned that phrase the hard way, kneeling on cold concrete, my hands useless on his chest. After that, it was just me in this old house. Daniel visited, of course. But work kept him busy, and city life swallowed him up. When he finally brought a woman home, I wanted so badly to like her that I almost missed who she really was. Kayla arrived in a swirl of scented lotion and shiny hair, talking about branding and health coaching. She met Daniel at some corporate wellness seminar, she said. Her handshake was firm, her smile wide, her eyes scanning my living room like a realtor pricing things out. "You must be Margaret," she chirped, looking me up and down. "I've heard so much about your cooking. Comfort food is my weakness. We'll have to work on that, right, Daniel?" The first time they stayed for dinner, I made roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans with real butter and salt. Halfway through, she laughed lightly and said, "No wonder he was such a chubby teenager. You feed him so much starch." I smiled back. "Because that's what you do with your son's new girlfriend." But the words stuck like a pebble in my shoe. It went on like that. Little comments, always wrapped in sugar. "You're pre-diabetic, right, Margaret? All the women in my family switched to plant-based at your age. It's never too late. You really still use white flour." "Oh my gosh." "Well, we'll modernize you." She was always optimizing something. Our pantry, Daniel's schedule, my wardrobe. The way she said, "What?" meant me. The way she said, "Modernize," meant replace. When I was born, I thought maybe she'd soften. And for a little while she did. I watched her rock that tiny bundle in the hospital, dark circles under her eyes, hair scraped into a knot. And I saw a glimpse of something almost tender. She handed him to me, and my arms remembered the weight they thought they'd forgotten. "Look at you," I whispered to him. "You're the best thing that ever happened to this family." The best thing, and, if you listen to Kayla talk long enough, the worst burden. At first it was small concerns. He didn't babble as much as other babies. He didn't always look when you called his name. By 2, the pediatrician started saying, "developmental delay." By 3, there were evaluations, forms, waiting lists. Words like spectrum and nonverbal hung in the air. A therapist once said gently, "With enough support, some children labeled nonverbal do find ways to communicate. We should never assume." Kayla cut her off with a tight smile. "We have to be realistic," she said. "He doesn't talk. At all. It's okay. We accept that." She accepted it so completely that it became her story. At a neighborhood barbecue when Eli was 4, I heard her over by the cooler with some of Daniel's friends. "Eli doesn't talk," she said, one hand pressed to her heart like a martyr. "At all. He's like a permanent baby. But that's okay, I'm strong enough to handle it. God gives special children to special mothers, right?" They cooed and praised her. No one asked Eli what he thought about being called a permanent baby. I tried to stay involved. I offered to take him to speech therapy, to sit in on school meetings. There was always a reason it wasn't convenient. "The clinic is across town, Margaret. It would be too much for you. The school has strict security, only parents and therapists can attend." Overnights would dysregulate him. "It's too hard for Mom with her heart and all his needs." I believed her more often than I should have. My heart really did start acting up after Frank died. Doctor visits multiplied. Blood pressure cuffs, cholesterol checks. Little orange bottles lined up like soldiers on my bathroom shelf. Somewhere along the way, Kayla started coming with me. "I'll drive," she insisted. "Parking by the hospital is a nightmare. And you never remember what the doctor says anyway." She took over at the front desk, answered questions for me before I could open my mouth. When the new receptionist asked about my medications, Kayla rattled them off while I sat there like a prop. "Mom, Kayla's just better with paperwork. Daniel told me when I mentioned it. You hate online forms. Let her help." Help shifted to control so slowly I hardly noticed. She switched my prescriptions to a mail-order pharmacy to save you trips, then started bringing pre-sorted pill packs, each day neatly printed. When I tried to read the microscopic labels, she laughed. "All that tiny print will give you a stroke," she joked. "Just trust the process. You take what's in the box, nothing else." I was grateful, I won't lie. It's humiliating to admit how good it felt when someone else worried about the details. But every time she put a forkful of proved food in front of me and frowned at my own cooking, a little voice in the back of my mind cleared its throat. I knew how easily one careless spoonful could hurt a person. Years ago at the school, we had a scare. 20 kids came down with stomach cramps after lunch. The district tried to blame my kitchen, but I knew my freezers and my staff. I demanded they test everything. They found the culprit in the end. A batch of chicken salad from an outside vendor, stored just a few hours too warm in a delivery truck. The health inspector brought me back the report. "You were right to raise hell," he said. "If you hadn't trusted your nose, we might have had kids in the hospital." That memory sat with me now as I watched Eli across the table, his dark eyes sharp in a face everyone dismissed as blank. He'd just shattered a decade of silence to knock a fork out of my hand. If he'd broken 10 years of quiet for one mouthful, what had he been forced to watch all those years? I trusted Kayla with my food and my pills. How many things had he seen and understood while the rest of us treated him like furniture? I looked down at the casserole congealing on my plate, the capsule sweating in my fist. Then back at my grandson. He was still watching the pill bottle like it might explode. I realized, with a cold twist in my gut, that I had been listening to the wrong people for a very long time. "I hear you, Eli," I said softly. "I'm listening now." And for the first time since Frank died, I decided to trust my own instincts over anyone else's. I pulled out the old vinyl chair from the corner and set it next to mine, away from the casserole and the open pill organizer. My hands were shaking more than I wanted them to, so I held the back of the chair a second and made myself breathe. "Come sit with me, Eli," I said. "Over here." He hovered by the table, eyes darting from my hand to the plate like he expected the food to jump up and attack me. Slowly he edged around and lowered himself onto the chair. His feet didn't quite touch the floor. They swung, toes brushing the tiles. Up close, I could see the flush on his cheeks and a sheen of sweat at his hairline. Whatever it had cost him to speak those few words, it had taken everything he had. I gentled my voice the way I used to with nervous kindergartners. "You did good," I told him. "You stopped me. I'm not going to eat it. And I'm not taking any more of those pills until I understand what's going on. You're safe here. Do you hear me? You are safe with Grandma. His fingers curled into the hem of his T-shirt, twisting the cotton. He glanced at the kitchen doorway like he expected Kayla to appear there any second. She's not here, I said. It's just you and me. Nobody else can hear us. Whatever you tell me stays between us unless you say otherwise. He swallowed, Adam's apple bobbing in his thin throat. I can talk, he said at last, halting. Just not when she's here. I felt something in my chest crack. How long have you been able to talk, sweetheart? He thought about it. You could see the years flickering behind his eyes, little windows opening and closing. Since 5, he said slowly, maybe 4. In my room. To my toys. To the mirror. When it's loud outside and nobody hears me. All those birthdays where I'd blown out candles and made a wish he'd speak. He'd been talking to his own reflection, while we clapped for nothing. Why not in front of us? I asked, though I already had a sick guess. He raised one hand and pinched the soft skin on the inside of his upper arm, hard enough that I winced watching. She does that, he whispered, under the table where no one sees. When I make sounds. Your mom, I said, my mouth dry. He nodded. If I make noise at dinner or say a word she doesn't like, she grabs here. He pinched again, then cupped his jaw with that same small hand, fingers pressing into his cheeks. His voice changed, high and rough, imitating Kayla's whisper. If you babble again, the doctors will lock you in a place where even your grandma can't visit. They will tie you to the bed. They will forget to feed you. The image hit me like a slap. For a moment I had to close my eyes, because I could see her so clearly leaning into his ear with that sugar voice sharpened to a knife. So you learn not to make noise, I said quietly. He stared at his knees. If I'm quiet, she talks nice in front of people. She hugs me where they can see. She buys me headphones. His mouth twisted, something like a bitter laugh ghosting across his face. If I talk, she's mad after. My fists clenched on top of the tablecloth. I made myself loosen them. Rage makes your hands shake, kids notice that. What they need is steady. I'm so sorry, I said. You never deserved that, ever. None of that is your fault. He shrugged one shoulder, a movement too old for a little boy. It's better if I'm furniture, he murmured. That one word, furniture, almost undid me. I took a breath, held it until the heat behind my eyes cooled to a slow, hard burn. Illy, I said. You are not furniture. You are not a burden. You are my grandson, and something scared you enough to break the rules you've lived by for years. I need you to tell me why I shouldn't eat that food, why I shouldn't take those pills. Can you do that for me? He lifted his head. For the first time in a long time, he looked less like a child and more like a witness. She's been mixing, he said. For a while. Mixing what? He pointed at the pill organizer still sitting open, Friday p.m. gaping like a little mouth. She takes the lids off when you're in the bathroom, he said. She pours the little round ones into the sink. He mimed shaking something out, then tipping it. I hear them go plink-plink down the drain. Then she has bags. What kind of bags? His hands described a little square in the air. Plastic, no words. She keeps them up high in the cabinet over the fridge, not where the spices live. She puts powder from the bag into the boxes with the other pills. She uses the tiny spoon from my medicine, the one with the blue handle. My mind started pulling threads together. I could see Kayla at my sink, laughing. Oops, butterfingers. If I walked in too soon. How often had I shrugged that off? Did you ever smell it? I asked. The powder. He scrunched his nose, thinking. Like the stuff Dad put in the shed when we had mice. He said finally. Not the green blocks. The one in the bottle with the skull. He used a mask when he scooped it. A rat poison. My vision wavered round the edges. I gripped the tablecloth to steady myself. And the casserole, I forced out. Today. What did you see? He glanced at the still, steaming dish like it might lunge at him. She cooked it yesterday, he said, when Dad was at work. I watched from the hallway. She made the sauce in the pan, then got the bag from the top cabinet. The one with no words. She poured some in her hand first, then sprinkled it over the pan. Then she stirred and stirred, fast like she was hiding it. I remembered how she was always telling me not to stand too close to the stove when I visited. You'll get dizzy from the steam. Margaret. Maybe she just didn't want me to smell what she was adding. When you came in, Ely continued, she used a new spoon, a clean one. The blue one was in the trash, under the paper towels. It was such a small detail, that hidden spoon. So ordinary, and yet my heart knew the weight of it. Time hiccuped. My mind ran through the last year like a film on fast forward. The day I'd blacked out on the church steps, waking to Kayla's worried face and the whisper, she forgot to eat breakfast again. The dizzy spells that always seemed to follow nights she'd insisted on bringing me dinner. That flu bug in the spring that had me hiving over the toilet while she patted my back and said, "Age is rough, isn't it?" My stomach rolled now, but it wasn't from food. "What did she say about me?" I asked, afraid of the answer and needing it anyway. He twisted his shirt again. "On the phone last week. I was on the floor. She thought I had my headphones on, but the battery was dead." His eyes met mine. "She told someone. She won't last the year if we don't help nature along. She's already so weak." He swallowed. Then she laughed. "Help nature along," I whispered. "Kinder for who?" she said. He hesitated, then pushed through. "She said you were already sick, so it was kinder if it was quick." My hand went to my chest, not because my heart hurt, though it did, but because I felt something hollow out under my ribs. You can give birth to one person and think you know them. Turns out, you don't always know the person they marry. "Did you ever tell your dad any of this?" I asked. A shadow crossed his face. "Once," he said, "at breakfast." I said, "Mom pinches." Hey, he got excited. Ely's voice got a little brighter, imitating Daniel. "He vocalized," he said. "Kayla, did you hear? He's trying to talk." He looked down at his hands. Mom smiled at him. Later, when he went to the store, she locked me in my room. "No lights, no tablet," she said. "You scared him. Don't you ever do that again." That settled it. Whatever Kayla was, she wasn't just overwhelmed or thoughtless. This was deliberate. Very carefully, I stood up. My knees complained again, but my head had gone very still. "We're not going to panic," I said. "We're going to prove it." I took my old flip phone from the counter and, with clumsy fingers, snapped pictures. The casserole on my floured plate. The pill organizer, Friday p.m. open. The white bottle with its blurry label. Eli's small hand resting on the table to show scale and time. Then I went to the pantry and reached for a thing I hadn't used since I retired my battered insulated lunch bag, the one that had carried 1,000 hot meals without complaint. I opened it on the counter. "We're going to pack up some of this food," I told Eli, "and a couple of these pills. And then we're going to take them to someone who knows exactly what they're looking at." "Woo?" he asked, voice very small now that the story was out of him. "Someone who still owes me a favor," I said. On my way to the cupboard, I passed the hallway and my eyes caught the small black disc Kayla had stuck up near the ceiling last month. "A smart camera," she'd called it cheerfully. "So we can check in on you. For safety." It stared down at me now with its blind, unblinking eye. A chill ran along my spine. It occurred to me that Kayla might not just be watching my pill intake. She might be watching this. I clicked the lock on the front door, more for my own spine than any real protection, and looked back at my grandson. If she'd been willing to hurt him to keep him quiet, I had no doubt she'd hurt me too. "All right, Eli," I said, forcing my voice calm. "From here on out, we're very careful about what we do and what we say. But one thing's for sure." He waited. "I believe you," I said. "And I won't let her make you furniture ever again." The longer I stared at that little black disc on my hallway ceiling, the less it looked like a safety gadget and the more it felt like an eye. Ely followed my gaze, then slid off his chair and padded over to the doorway in his socks. He tilted his head back, squinting up. "That one sees the hallway," he said quietly, "and the front door, and the couch." I hadn't asked him anything yet. He just knew what I was thinking. "You know about these?" I asked. He nodded, eyes still on the smart sensor. "She calls them nannies," he said. "She says they help her take care of you. And me. A nannies." I tasted the word like something sour. "What else?" I asked. "Show me." We did a slow circuit of my own home like strangers. Ely moved ahead of me, small hand brushing doorframes, bare feet silent on the wood. In the living room, he stopped in front of the digital picture frame Kayla had given me last Christmas. "For you, so you won't be lonely," she'd said, kissing my cheek as the screen cycled through photos of Eli in various stages of babyhood. I'd felt guilty for thinking it was a little impersonal. Now Illy pointed at the top corner of the frame, where a barely visible pinprick of glass winked. "That one sees the whole room," he murmured. "She watches it on her tablet. At home I saw her." I bent closer. There it was, the tiniest lens, hidden in the plastic wave of the frame's edge. "Are you sure it's not just something else?" I asked weakly. She said, "Look," she took the whole tray, like a good little patient. He recited, gaze still fixed. "Last month, when you stayed over, you had soup. You went to bed early." She showed Dad. He laughed. Something cold slid down my spine. We went back to the kitchen. Ely pointed up at the new motion sensor Kayla had insisted on installing over the pantry. "So we can turn the lights on for you when you come in," she'd said. "It's safer. There's a red light sometimes," he whispered now. "It blinks when you sit at the table. That means it's watching." "How many are there?" I asked. "3, he said. "One in the hall. One in here. One on the frame. She wanted one in your bedroom, but Dad said no. He said it was creepy. She put one in the lamp instead, but it broke." I thought of all the nights I'd shuffled to the bathroom in my robe, of all the mornings I'd sat in this kitchen in my housecoat, hair flat and face unwashed, taking whatever pills were in front of me, thinking I was alone. "She can see mid-eat," I said slowly. "And your pills," he added. As if summoned by that thought, the landline rang. "That's her," Ely whispered. My heart stuttered, then rallied. I wiped my hands on my apron and went to the wall phone. "Hello." "Hi, Mom." Kayla's voice sang down the line, all sunshine and concern. "Just checking in before we lose service. We're about an hour from the resort. Did you eat already? Don't wait until late or you'll get indigestion. You know how you are." I looked at the casserole cooling on the counter, at the pill organizer still open. Slowly, deliberately, I lifted the receiver off the hook and walked it back toward the table, the cord stretching behind me like a leash. "Oh, I'm already full, dear," I told her, pitching my voice up a fraction. "You spoil me." That turkey bake was very filling. "Good," she said, a little too quickly. "And your evening pill? You took the new supplement, right? The white capsule." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the faint red blink on the kitchen sensor. I picked up my plate, still smeared with food but empty, and set it right under the camera's view. I nudged the pill organizer so the Friday PM compartment looked closed, as if it had been used. "Oh yes," I lied smoothly, surprised at myself. "I took everything. I'll probably sleep like a baby." Behind me, Ellie watched, eyes wide. He understood. He moved the casserole dish just out of the camera's angle. Kayla laughed on the line. "Well, don't overdo it. You know you can't be trusted with changing your own doses, Margaret. We don't want another incident, do we?" There it was again. Incident, like the time I'd woken up on the church steps with a bruise on my temple and a crowd of worried faces. Dehydration, they'd said. Age. I wondered now what she'd told the EMTs. "No," I said softly. "We don't?" She chattered a bit more about the cabin, the view of the lake, how, desperately, she'd needed this break. I made the right noises. When I hung up, my hand was damp on the receiver. Eli was staring at me. "You lied," he said, not accusing, just surprised. "I did," I answered. "And I don't feel proud of it. But for once, I'm going to use her own tricks on her." We waited a full minute to be sure she wasn't calling back, then moved into action. "Get my blue Tupperware," I told him. "The one with the tight lid." He fetched it from the cabinet. I scraped a large portion of casserole into it. Every greasy smear, every suspicious breadcrumb. Then I plucked 2 capsules and a couple of tablets from the organizer, dropped them into an old film canister I still had in a drawer. Some habits never die, and snapped it shut. "Where are we putting them?" Ely asked. "Somewhere she'll never look," I said. We went out the back door to the detached garage. Kayla thought the old fridge out there was broken. That's what I'd let her think when she'd suggested hauling it to the dump. "She doesn't like clutter," Daniel had said with a helpless shrug. Inside, the garage smelled like oil and dust. I opened the fridge. The light flickered on obligingly. I slid the Tupperware and the canister onto the bottom shelf behind a row of mason jars. There, I said, closing it with a firm seal. Cold and out of sight. Back in the house, I unplugged the digital frame and the kitchen sensor from their sockets, then plugged each into the power strip under the counter where my toaster lived. From the front, the cords still curled toward their original outlets. To anyone watching, the images would simply freeze. That night I slept badly. Every small sound in the house felt magnified, as if the walls themselves were listening. The next morning, I took Eli with me to see my doctor. I told Kayla we were going to the park. It wasn't entirely a lie. There were trees outside the clinic. At the reception desk, I gave my name. The young woman behind the computer smiled politely.
"Oh, Mrs.
Jensen," she said. "We usually coordinate everything through your daughter-in-law, right? Miss Kayla. She's listed as your contact and portal manager." "I'd like to talk to the doctor myself today," I said, "and review my medications." The receptionist's smile flickered, then returned cooler. "Of course. Just have a seat." In the exam room, Dr. Morgan flipped through my chart on his tablet, not looking me in the eye as much as he used to. "What brings you in, Margaret?" he asked. I sat up straighter on the paper-covered table. "I've been having dizzy spells," I said, "after certain meals. And I'd like to see a printed list of what I'm actually supposed to be taking. Not just what comes in the little boxes." He tapped the screen. "We've been over your regimen several times," he said. "Your daughter-in-law is very thorough. You're fortunate to have a family member so involved. Many of my older patients don't have that. A fortunate." There it was again. "I want to see it," I repeated. "Please." He sighed, then turned the tablet so I could see. Little icons, long words. Next to my name in smaller type was a note: mild cognitive impairment. Anxious, per DIL report. Monitor for paranoia. Paranoia. There was the word that would make everything I said sound suspect. "What's that?" I asked, tapping the note. "Oh, just a flag," he said quickly. "Kayla mentioned you've been more forgetful. Worried about people taking advantage of you. It's not unusual at your age. Memory lapses, a little anxiety. In fact, if you feel this dizzy, we might consider a low-dose anti-anxiety medication. It could help with your suspicions." Heat rose in my face. I was back in grade school being told I'd imagined something another girl had said because adults didn't want to deal with it. "I don't need something to stop me from asking questions," I said as evenly as I could. "I need to know what I'm swallowing." He hesitated. For a moment, the old doctor I knew peeked through, the one who'd delivered the news gently when Frank's tests came back bad. "I'll print your list," he said at last. "But truly, Margaret, you are fortunate. Kayla keeps very good records." I heard controlled, where he said, fortunate. Heard handled, where he praised, involved. We left with a piece of paper and a knot in my chest. Outside in the parking lot, Eli slipped his hand into mine. "They don't listen," he said. "No," I agreed, "but someone will." Back home, my cell buzzed before I'd even taken off my shoes. FaceTime request Kyla. Eli's grip on my hand tightened. I took a breath and accepted. Her face filled the screen, lake behind her, sunglasses perched on her head. She smiled so wide I could see every tooth. "Hey, sweetie," she cooed. "Just checking in. Did you remember your morning pills? Show me just so I can relax, okay?" She angled her own camera to show Daniel in the background, half listening, beer in hand. This was a performance. "Of course," I said, hauling my foggiest expression onto my features. I set the phone against the sugar canister so she'd see my hands and the table. I opened the organizer, plucked out the capsule and tablets, held them up. "See," I said. "Right here." "Good girl," she said, "the way you talk to a dog. Now take them." I brought my hand toward my mouth, then coughed deliberately, covering my lips with my fingers. In that second, I tucked the pills into my palm, made my throat work like I was swallowing, and chased it with a gulp of water. Then I opened my now empty hand to the camera. "All gone," I said. Her eyes flicked to the side, probably at some frozen image from her nanny cameras. She relaxed. "Perfect," she said. "Now I can enjoy my hike. Love you, Mom. Don't overthink things. Just trust us." When the call ended, I sat very still at my kitchen table, my closed fist tingling with chalky residue. I felt ashamed, pretending to be exactly the doddering old woman she wanted me to be. But underneath the shame was something else, and a grim satisfaction. If she thought I was under her thumb, she'd be careless. And careless people make mistakes. I opened my hand over a napkin. The pills tumbled out, harmless for now. In the drawer by the stove, under a stack of old takeaway menace, I kept a little box of relics from my cafeteria days: whistles, hairnets, a faded Polaroid of my staff, and, tucked into the corner, a yellowed business card. Luis Alvarez Contiwahelt in Espitar, it said. Tiny print listed a number that might have been disconnected 10 years ago, for all I knew. I dialed it anyway. It rang twice. Then a raspy voice answered. "This is Dr. Alvarez, retired but still nosy." "Who's this?" I smiled for the first time that day, sharp and thin. "It's the lunch lady who shut down your favorite taco truck for not washing its lettuce," I said. There was a beat, then a bark of laughter. "Margaret Jensen," he said. "Well, I'll be damned. If you're calling me, something's really wrong." "You have no idea," I replied. "Can you meet an old woman who's apparently paranoid and fortunate in the worst way?" "For you," he said. "I'll bring my best microscope. Tell me when and where." Louis chose the kind of diner that still smelled like burned coffee and bacon grease, halfway between town and nowhere. The vinyl booths were cracked, the pie in the glass case looked older than Eli. And the waitress called everyone on, whether you were 12 or 80. "This place hasn't killed me yet," he said when I slid into the booth across from him. "Figure that's as good a recommendation as any." He looked older, of course. We both did. His hair, once thick and black, was now more salt than pepper, and his paunch pressed against the buttons of his checked shirt. But his eyes were the same keen dark coins I remembered from inspection days, missing nothing. "You look exactly the same," I lied. He snorted. "You always were a terrible liar, Margaret. But I'll take it." For a few minutes we talked about safer things. Teachers we both knew who'd retired or died, the way the district had cut corners since I left, the taco truck I'd gotten him to shut down after finding unwashed cilantro full of soil. "You saved me from a lawsuit with that one," he said. "I still can't walk past Lyme without thinking of E. coli." We chuckled. But the laughter felt thin. There was something heavy between us, sitting on the table with the ketchup and mustard. I reached down to my handbag and pulled out the little insulated lunch bag. It felt wrong to bring that familiar thing into this context, like putting a Sunday casserole on a dissecting table. "I need your professional nose," I said quietly. "And your toys." His expression sharpened. "You said that on the phone. You think someone's messing with your food." I unzipped the bag and, careful not to make a scene, slid 3 items onto the table between us. The sealed Tupperware with Kayla's casserole sloshing coldly inside, a small Ziploc with 3 white capsules and 2 tablets, and a manila envelope with printed photos I'd rushed at the pharmacy kiosk. He stared at them, then at me. "You're asking me to test food for potential poisoning without a formal complaint," he said slowly. "Off the books. That's irregular even for me." "I know." I folded my hands to keep them still. "If I march into the police station and say, 'My daughter-in-law's trying to kill me,' they'll pull up my chart, see that little note about paranoia and mild cognitive whatever, and send me home with a pamphlet about aging. My doctor already wants to give me pills to stop me asking questions." He considered that jaw working. "You could file with Adult Protective Services. They have to look into it. Eventually," I said. "By the time they get around to it, I could be 6 feet under, courtesy of natural causes." He sighed, looking out the window at the semi-trucks roaring by, then back at me. "Tell me everything," he said. "Broad strokes. Start with why this," he nudged the Tupperware, "scares you." So I did. Not all of it. I left out Eli's words about locked rooms and pinches. Didn't mention that my mute grandson had been the one to knock the fork away. That was his story to tell when he was ready. But I laid out the dizzy spells after Kayla's dinners, the capsules that didn't match my prescription list, the phone call about helping nature along, the hidden cameras. He didn't interrupt much. When I faltered, he just nodded, his fingers drumming a slow beat on the formica. "If I'm wrong," I finished, throat tight, "I'll apologize to her for the rest of my life. I'll tell her she was right, that I was crazy and ungrateful and old. But if I'm right and I do nothing," I swallowed, "then I'm giving her permission." He picked up the baggie of capsules, holding it up to the dim diner light. "Your pharmacist's labels don't list anything like this?" he asked. I slid over one of the photos. Blurry, but legible enough. My official med list from Dr. Morgan's office. "These aren't on there," I said. "At all," he grunted. "All right. Here's what I can do." He lowered his voice. "I still consult for a few restaurants. Keeps me in beer money. I've got a little lab set up in my basement. Nothing fancy, but enough for preliminary screens. Colorimetric reagents, a decent scope. I can tell you if something's there that shouldn't be. But it won't be court admissible. Chain of custody is shot the minute you hand it to me in a greasy spoon." "I understand," I said. I need to know if I'm crazy." "You're the sanest woman I've met all year," he said bluntly. "I've shut down restaurants for less suspicious soup than this." He packed the samples back into my bag like they were evidence, which, of course, they were. "Give me a day or two," he said. "Don't change your routine too much. Don't tip your hand. If she's watching you, let her think you're still the good little patient. I've had a lot of practice acting helpless lately," I said wryly. He squeezed my hand once, surprising me. "If this is what we both think it is," he said, "you're gonna need more than my toys. But first we confirm. Then we plan." The next 48 hours stretched like stale gum. At home I moved through my days as if Kayla's invisible eyes were on me, which for all I knew they were. I made toast and forgot to eat the rubbery eggs she'd left. I palmed pills and flushed them. When she called, I slurred my words just a touch, let my shoulders slump into the perfect picture of the fading mother-in-law she told everyone I was. "See," she cooed at one point. Phone on speaker so Daniel could hear. "The supplements are working. You sound so relaxed." Eli and I developed a silent language. A tap on the table meant camera. A hand squeeze meant phone. We stayed mostly in the living room where I'd unplugged the frame, talking in low voices when the red lights were off, lapsing into our old roles when they blinked on. At night, when the house was finally quiet, I lay awake listening for my cell phone, half hoping, half dreading the buzz. It came on the second night, just before 11. "Alvarez." I answered, heart pounding harder than it had any right to. His voice was different. The easy humor from the diner was gone, replaced by something tight and hard. "You sitting down?" he asked. "I am now," I said, easing into my armchair. "I ran the casserole first," he said, getting right to it. "Smelled it, heavy garlic, rosemary, and something underneath. Did a basic salt test. That dish could have dried out a swimming pool. Sodium's through the roof. Enough to spike your blood pressure on its own if you ate it regularly. I thought it tasted strong. That's the least of it." I could hear clinks and muffled drawers on his end, like he was pacing his basement. Did a quick solvent extraction. Ran a few drops with a general sedative reagent. "You ever heard of psilocin?" "Can't say I have. It's a tranquilizer, mostly for large animals. Horses. Sometimes shows up on the street mixed with narcotics. It shouldn't be anywhere near a 72-year-old woman's dinner." My hand tightened on the receiver. "You're sure?" "As sure as I can be with what I've got," he said. "And the capsules?" he exhaled. "Those are worse." I waited. "They're not any prescription your doctor has you on," he said. "Check the imprint against the database my contact sent me. Probably compounded or tampered with. When I crushed one and ran it through the anticoagulant assay, it lit up like a Christmas tree. It's a warfarin analog, Margaret. Rat poison by another name, mixed with enough of your real meds to look and feel right." The room tilted for a second. I gripped the arm of the chair until it steadied. "How much?" I managed. "Low dose, from what I can see," he said. "Which is exactly the point. You eat enough meals laced with this garbage, take enough of those capsules, your blood gets thin. Very thin. One bad fall, on your church steps, say, or in your shower, and you bleed inside your skull, or your stomach lining starts to seep. Slow, vague symptoms. Dizziness, fatigue, confusion. By the time anyone figures out what's wrong, if they even look, it's too late. No ER doctor would suspect it. I finished for him. They'd see an old woman who fell, and a chart that says mild cognitive impairment and anxiety." He added, "They'd call it a tragic accident. This isn't clumsy dosing, Margaret. It's crafted. Someone wants you to die slowly and plausibly. There was a long silence. I heard the old clock in my hallway tick 6 times. "You need to call the police," he said at last. "Tonight. Bring them what we have. At least get adult protective services in." "And tell them what?" I asked. "That my samples came through your unofficial basement lab. Any half-decent defense attorney will shred that. And while we're wrangling over admissibility, she'll lawyer up, pack a bag, and I'll trip over my own feet." He didn't argue. He knew how these things played. "She's got her claws in your doctor," he said. "Probably your finances too." "She's the portal manager," I said. "The clinic told me I was fortunate." He made a scornful sound. "My contact at the county flagged something else," he said. "Your daughter-in-law called the office on aging last month. Asked about long-term care options. Specifically, what happens to a person's house if they decline mentally and need placement." "Decline mentally," I repeated. "That's convenient. Margaret," he said quietly. "This is not a woman idly tossing too much salt in your soup. This is design." A wave of exhaustion rolled over me, but under it, something solid hardening. I thought of Eli's small hand on my arm, the way he pinched his skin to show me what she did when he made a sound. "If I go to the police now with half a story," I said, "she spins it. I'm the crazy old bat who hates her daughter-in-law and lost a few pills. She cries on Daniel's shoulder, says she tried her best, and then what? I go home with a pamphlet and she starts making smoothies instead of casseroles." He was quiet for a beat. "You're not wrong," he admitted. "Judges like clean evidence. Lab reports with signatures, clear chains, videos that show a hand in the cookie jar. Not just an old inspector and his favorite lunch lady crying foul." "Then we get them that," I said. He chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "There's the Margaret I know. Always with the logbook. You always said my records drove you crazy," I reminded him. "They also saved my butt more than once," he replied. "Look, if we're doing this, we do it methodically. You still have your old notebooks." "In a box," I said. "Why?" "Because you're going to start another one," he said. "Every pill you're supposed to take, every meal she brings, every time you feel dizzy, you write it down. Dates times what you ate. If she's tampering, there'll be a pattern. And you. I'll keep these samples properly stored," he said. "And next time she drops off food, you save some again. We'll do a full comparative panel. Meanwhile, I'll see if my contact at the pharmacy can pull your real dispense records. If we can show that what's in your organizer doesn't match what the pharmacy sent, that's the start of a trail." I rubbed my forehead. "Is there any way," I asked slowly, "to prove she means it for me? That it's not just incompetence, a mix-up? Intent's the hardest part," he said. "Chemicals don't come with little notes saying for homicide." "But you said your grandson's been watching her for years." I thought of Eli in his corner, eyes tracking every move, cataloging every pinch and whisper. "He has," I said. "Then between your logs, my tests, and his eyes," Alvarez said, "we might just build a story solid enough that even your doctor can't ignore it." But for the first time in days, my fear shifted into something else, leaner, sharper. Hope, yes, and something that tasted a lot like resolve. When I first brought Eli to meet Alvarez, the boy tucked himself so far behind my hip he might as well have been my shadow. We met at his house this time, not the diner. From the outside, it was an ordinary little bungalow with peeling paint and a lawn that had given up, but the basement was another world. Stainless steel tables, shelves of labeled bottles, a second-hand microscope that looked like it had seen more action than the average patrol car. It smelled like coffee, bleach, and curiosity. Eli clung to my cardigan as we stepped off the last stair. His eyes darted over the strange equipment, lingering on a rack of test tubes glowing faintly under a blue lamp. "It's okay," I murmured. "He's on our side." Alvarez wiped his hands on a towel and turned toward us. When he saw Eli half hiding, his whole face softened in a way I hadn't expected. "And this must be the sharp pair of eyes you told me about," he said. Eli flinched at being noticed. I felt him press into me. "This is Eli," I said. "My grandson. He sees a lot more than people think." "That's so." Alvarez crouched down a little, bringing himself closer to Eli's height without getting in his space. "Well, Eli, I'm Luis. I'm a grown-up who knows how to catch people breaking rules. Your grandma and I used to get kitchens in trouble together. Something flickered at the corner of Eli's mouth. Not quite a smile, but not fear either. You don't have to say anything. I told him, resting a hand on his shoulder. They expect you not to talk, so you don't need to. Just listen like you've always done. He nodded minutely. Alvarez straightened and gestured us toward a cluttered workbench. I've got enough on those samples to raise hell when the time comes, he said. But you were right. We need more than my word and your nose. We need a pattern and, ideally, her own voice hanging her. She watches me on those little cameras, I said. Calls right after I'm supposed to have eaten. Forces me to show her I took my pills on video. Then let her, he said. But we'll be watching her back. He opened a drawer and pulled out Eli's old puzzle cube. I'd brought it over in my bag at his request. I took the liberty, he said, twisting the cube along one axis. One of the colored stickers lifted under his fingernail, revealing a pinhole smaller than a grain of rice. There's a teeny tiny audio recorder in here now. Motion activated. It'll run for hours. You keep fidgeting with this while she's around, kiddo, like you always do. And we'll capture everything she says when she thinks no one's paying attention. Eli's eyes widened. He reached for the cube, turning it over in his hands like a treasure. For me, he whispered. For the team, Alvarez said. You've been braver than most adults I've investigated, you know that? You're not a burden. You're the witness. Eli held the cube against his chest for a moment, then tucked it under his arm. What if she finds out? He asked, voice barely more than a breath. I answered before Alvarez could. Then she finds out about all of us at once, I said. And there will be other grown-ups here this time. Not just you and me. Alvarez slid a small gray pendant across the table toward me next. It looked like one of those medical alert buttons they advertise on late-night TV. For you, he said. Voice-activated recorder. Clip it to your shirt, wear it on a chain, whatever feels natural. You start having a spell, or she starts in about your pills, it'll catch it. I picked it up. It had a comforting weight. And if things go sideways in the moment? I asked. He glanced at Eli. How are you with phones? Kiddo, Eli's gaze dropped to the floor. I know 9011, he said quietly. I watched a video. You press green button, then the numbers. You have to stay on the line. I looked at him, startled. You never told anyone that? He shrugged one shoulder. She said I couldn't work machines. I wanted to prove to myself I could. Good, Alvarez said. If something happens, you get out of the room, you call. You say your name and address and that your grandma's been poisoned. Kids' calls get attention. They write whole policies around it. We spent the next hour laying out the pieces. Alvarez had already gotten a printout from the pharmacy through his contact. The list on the page and the pills in my organizer were like cousins. Similar shapes, different souls. She's swapping at least 2 of these, he said, tapping the chart. And this one. He pointed at a tiny code next to an anticoagulant. You've never been prescribed at all. If we can catch her on recording admitting she adjusted your doses without a doctor, that's gold. We went over my bank statements too. Eli perched on a stool, cube turning in his fingers. Alvarez traced a finger along a series of transfers. Here, he said. There's a pattern. Small, regular amounts from your pension into a joint account with Daniel. Note in the memo line.
How's fun your name's not on that?
Account. She said they were just holding it for repairs. I murmured. I wanted to help. The roof needed work, maybe, he said. But it also looks an awful lot like moving assets out of your reach before putting you somewhere for your own safety. We couldn't change what she'd already done. But we could use it to show motive. We need a moment where she feels safe enough to gloat. Alvarez said. People like that, they talk when they think they've won. She loves talking about my will, I said slowly. Keeps dropping hints about simplifying things for Daniel, just in case. He looked up sharply. Then that's our trigger. You call a meeting. Say you want to update your will, your power of attorney. All that paperwork people hate. Make it sound like you're giving her exactly what she wants. She'll come running. And Daniel? I ask. I don't want to blindside my own son. He needs to be there, Alvarez said. He needs to hear her with his own ears. You can't protect him from this forever, Margaret. If you don't let him see what she is, she'll drag him down with her. He wasn't wrong. That didn't make it hurt less. We'll do it at your house, he continued. Familiar territory for you, comfortable for them. I'll come as your church friend. What's her name? Mabel? I'll be Mabel's cousin, the one who knows about legal stuff. I'll bring a sample to read through. Hidden camera in my pen. Extra mic in my pocket. Eli frowned. What do I do? You, I said, leaning toward him, do what you've always done. You sit in your corner. You pretend to be bored. You click your cube. You listen to every word. Alvarez nodded. If she starts talking about your grandma's episodes, or what she's done for your own good, that little cube will hear it all. We'll give you a notebook, too, I added. If things get loud, and you can't talk, you write one word and show it to me. Pills. Fall. Home. Just one at a time. I'll know what you mean. He chewed his lip, thinking it through. And if she looks at me, he asked. You look past her, I said gently. Like you always have. That's your camouflage. Driving home that afternoon, Eli sat unusually straight in his seat, the cube resting in his lap like a mission, not a toy. Grandma, he said suddenly. Yes, baby. Will they believe me? He didn't say who. Doctors, police, his own father. They were all folded into that one they. They're going to hear you, I said. And they're going to hear her. Between the two of you, anyone who doesn't believe it is choosing not to. That night, after Kayla's usual check-in and my usual performance as the compliant invalid, I sat at the kitchen table with my old landline cradled in my palm. Eli was in the next room, pretending to watch cartoons, the cube near his hand. I dialed Daniel's number. It rang twice before he picked up, voice tired. Hey, Mom, he said. Everything okay? Kayla said you sounded off today. She always did color the picture before he saw it. I'm as okay as I'm going to be, I said. But I've been thinking about some things. Grown-up things. Wills, powers of attorney. All that morbid paperwork you young people avoid. He chuckled weakly. Morbid is right. I don't want there to be any confusion when something does happen to me, I went on. So before anything happens, I want us all to sit down. You, me, Kayla. Maybe a friend from church as a witness. It's time we talk about my will. There was a pause. On his end, I imagined him glancing at her, repeating my words. I could almost hear her eyes light up from here. That's probably a good idea, he said slowly. Kayla's been saying we should. She'll be thrilled you brought it up. I bet she will, I said. And for once I didn't bother to hide the steel in my voice. We picked a day 3 mornings out, so you have time to rest between appointments, Mom. When I hung up, my hand shook, but not from fear alone. It shook from the knowledge that I was, at last, stepping out of the role they'd scripted for me. I wasn't just the patient or the burden anymore. I was the one setting the stage. And when Kayla walked into my house trying to claim her victory, she'd find my mute grandson and my paranoid old self waiting for her, not as victims, but as investigators who'd finally decided to make some noise. The morning of the meeting, my living room looked like any other Sunday afternoon at an old woman's house. That was the point. I sat in my armchair with a blanket over my knees, an extra pillow behind my back to make me look smaller. The voice-activated pendant Alvarez had given me lay against my collarbone, cool and solid. My hands rested on top of the blanket, limp, the way Kayla liked to imagine them. Eli was on the rug by the coffee table, cross-legged, his puzzle cube turning lazily in his fingers. From the outside, he looked like he always did, half there, half in some private world. Only I saw the way his shoulders were a fraction tenser, the way his eyes kept flicking to the door. Daniel sat on the sofa, elbows on his knees, twisting his wedding ring around his finger. He'd come 10 minutes early alone, and we'd made small talk about traffic and his work until he'd run out of neutral things to say. You sure you want to do this, Mom? He asked for the 3rd time. Talking about wills and everything. It feels so morbid. At my age, I said mildly, pretending death doesn't exist is what feels silly. He tried to laugh, but it stuck in his throat. A knock came at the door before he could answer. The sound snapped through the room like a starter pistol. My heart gave one hard thump and then settled into a stubborn beat. That'll be Mr. Lopez, I said, reaching for my cane. From church, remember. Mabel's cousin. Alvarez had arrived 15 minutes before Daniel, in an old tweed jacket and a pair of bifocals that made him look more like a retired librarian than a man with a basement lab. I'd sent him to the kitchen to put on the kettle, which in this case meant positioning his camera pen on the sideboard and making sure the extra audio recorder was tucked behind the picture frame. Now he emerged from the hallway, wiping his hands on a dish towel, expression pleasantly blank. "I'll get it," he offered, shuffling to the door. He opened it, and Kayla flowed in on a wave of perfume and performance. "Oh, Margaret," she trilled, already halfway into the living room. "You look exhausted. Are you sure you're up for all this?" She wore a pale blouse and a dark pencil skirt, the kind of outfit you'd wear to a bank meeting. Under her arm was a leather folder, probably full of forms she'd printed from the internet. 10 documents every senior needs. "Hi, Mom," she said more softly, bending to kiss my cheek. Her lips were cold. "We'll make this quick, okay? Less stress for you." Her eyes flicked around the room, cataloging. Eli on the floor, Daniel on the sofa, the church friend in the doorway, the coffee table with a stack of papers I'd laid out. "Some real, some bala," I said, letting my voice wobble just a touch. "This is Mr. Lopez. He knows about legal things. Wills. I asked him to be a witness so we don't miss anything." She switched to charm in a heartbeat, offering her hand. "Oh, that's so thoughtful," she said. "We really appreciate you coming, Mr. Lopez. I'm Kayla, Mom's daughter-in-law. I've been handling most of her care." Alvarez took her hand, his grip firm. "A pleasure," he said. "Always good to see families planning ahead instead of leaving a mess for the courts." She beamed. "Exactly. That's what I've been telling them. I've kept all Mom's meds perfectly organized for years now. Kept her out of a home so far. We just want to make sure the paperwork matches the reality, you know." The recorder in Eli's cube caught that sentence as he turned blue to red to green, quiet as a mouse. We all sat. Kayla chose the arm of the sofa near Daniel, but angled her body toward me, like a lawyer addressing the judge. Alvarez settled in the side chair with a manila envelope on his lap, his pen resting, innocuous, in his front pocket. "So?" Kayla began brightly. "Mom, why don't you tell us what you were thinking about? We can translate it into something more official." "Translate?" I smiled inwardly. "I just don't want any confusion," I said, staring down at my own hands. "Sometimes I think these pills make me sicker, not better. And if I do get more confused, Mom," she cut in sharply, with a glance at Daniel and Mr. Lopez. "We've talked about this. You're just not used to them yet. Remember what Dr. Padel said? Dr. Padel, the ghost. You don't understand the dosages, that's why I handle everything." She went on, voice softening for the audience. "I fill the boxes, I track her episodes, I'm the one on the phone with night nurses. Honestly, Mr. Lopez, I know her history better than any doctor. They see her for 5 minutes. I'm the one staying up all night." "Are you a nurse?" Alvarez asked politely, tilting his head. "No," she said quickly, with a self-deprecating laugh. "But I might as well be. I mean, family caregivers do more than half the work in this country, and we get 0 credit. Isn't that right, Daniel?" He nodded automatically, though his eyes stayed on his hands. I shifted under my blanket, making it rustle. "Time to dangle the carrot." "I was thinking," I said, letting the confusion cloud my voice. "If something does happen, it might be easier for everyone if the house and things were under one person's management. For Daniel's sake." Kayla leaned forward, pupils dilating. "That's very sensible," she said. "It's just so complicated otherwise." Alvarez slid a few sheets from his envelope and placed them on the table. The fake draft we'd cobbled together looked official enough. My name at the top, tidy paragraphs of legalese, 2 or 3 key lines in plain English. "I put together a sample based on what Margaret told me," he said. "Of course, you'd have a lawyer file the final version. But this lays out the general idea." Kayla snatched it up, scanning. Her face lit up when she hit the right section. "I appoint my daughter-in-law, Kayla Jensen, as primary executor and manager of my estate, including the family home and liquid assets, to be held for the benefit of my son, Daniel," she read aloud. Her voice trembled just the right amount. "Mom, you want me to?" "For Daniel," I murmured. "He's not good with paperwork." She swiveled toward him, eyes shining. "See, honey," she said. "This is what I've been saying. It's just practical. So I'd be the one authorized if you ever, you know." She made a vague circling gesture by her head. "Couldn't make decisions." Daniel shifted. "Kayla. And we really should consider a clause about long-term care if she gets more confused." She steamrolled on. "It's so much paperwork otherwise. If we get that in writing now, then when the time comes, we can transition her without all the court drama." "When the time comes," Alvarez repeated mildly. "You speak like someone who's considered worst-case scenarios very thoroughly." She laughed again, high and quick. "I'm just being realistic," she said. "I mean, look at last year." She glanced at Mr. Lopez for effect, then back at Daniel and me. "Mom's been wandering off in her mind sometimes," she said. "Spacey, you know. There was that little fall on the back steps. Could have been so much worse if I hadn't adjusted the meds." "Adjusted the meds?" Alvarez asked, casually uncapping his pen. She didn't hear the click over her own voice. "Well, her doctor's too conservative," she said. "He doesn't see what I see. He'd have her on baby doses forever. I mean, when she blacked out on the steps, that was probably just the blood thinner and the sleeping pill together. I've told her 100 times not to take them both, but she forgets. So I sort them for her now." I frowned, wrinkling my brow. "What fall?" I asked. "I remember church. Not the steps." She turned to me, annoyance flickering before she smoothed it away. "One you blacked out," she repeated slowly, carrying the recycling out back. "You hit your head on the railing. The EMT said it was probably dehydration in your meds. We were lucky, Mom. If I hadn't been there." Her hand fluttered to her chest in a little show of relief. Ellie's cube turned, click, click, capturing every word. "Sometimes," I ventured, as if thinking aloud, "I wonder if I should just take my pill bottles down to the pharmacy, have them double-check everything. Just to be sure there aren't any mix-ups." Her reaction was immediate and sharp, the mask slipping a fraction. "Why would you do that?" she snapped. "Don't you trust me? After everything I've sacrificed?" Daniel's head came up. "Kayla," he said, a warning in his tone. "She's just asking a question." She flushed, then forced a laugh. "I'm sorry," she said. "It's just, if you start changing doses on your own, Mom, you could really hurt yourself. Do you understand? These aren't vitamins. If you don't let me manage this, you could have a tragic accident at your age. A slip and fall, a stroke. Do you really want to risk that?" Her voice had gone too loud, too fervent. The words hung in the air, heavy, unmistakable. Daniel stared at her. "That sounds intense," he said slowly. "I'm just being realistic, honey," she said again, softer, patting his knee. "You know how she is. She'd forget whether she took something and double dose. She could bleed out from a nosebleed if she's not careful. You seem very familiar with all the ways things could go wrong," Alvarez observed. "Have you discussed these scenarios with her doctor?" She rolled her eyes. "Doctors," she scoffed. "They're terrified of being sued. They undertreat everything. They don't see her wandering at night, calling me in a panic because she forgot where she put her keys. They don't sit with her at 2 in the morning when she's dizzy. I do. I'm the one who's kept her out of a home so far." Her tone on that last phrase had an edgy "out of a home," as if it were some terrible favor she could revoke. Under my blanket, my hands curled into fists, then relaxed. I'd got what we needed. Her voice, her confidence, her contempt, all neatly wrapped in sound waves inside a child's toy and a cheap pendant. "Maybe we've talked enough about my pills," I said gently. "Mr. Lopez, could you go over the rest? Make sure I understand where things go when I head upstairs." I let my voice wobble on the last words, and Kayla pounced, squeezing my hand in both of hers. "Oh, Mom," she said, eyes shining with manufactured tears. "Don't talk like that. You're not going anywhere. Not if I have anything to say about it." That, too, went into the record. Alvarez cleared his throat and ran through the will, hitting all the right beats. "Small trust for Illy." Kayla barely glanced at that line. "A modest sum for church. Everything else, to be managed by my devoted daughter-in-law. Kayla for the benefit of my son, Daniel." By the end, her cheeks were flushed, her breathing shallow. She was standing right at the edge, teetering over full confession. All I had to do was flick There's just one more thing, I said. They all turned to look at me. I sat a little straighter, let the frailness drop from my voice like an old coat. Before I sign anything that puts my life and house and death in someone's hands, I said clearly, there's one more witness I'd like you to hear from. I turned my head toward the rug, toward the boy everyone in that room had labeled mute, broken, less. Ali, I said, would you come stand by Grandma a moment? He set his puzzle cube down very carefully on the coffee table. Then, to the visible shock of his parents, my grandson stood up. For a second, nobody moved. Eli standing there in the middle of my living room was such an ordinary thing, and at the same time, the strangest sight I'd ever seen. He'd always been closer to the carpet than to eye level in this house. Curled up in corners, folded into chairs, small and silent. Now he straightened his shoulders. His hands were empty. The puzzle cube sat abandoned on the coffee table. I watched his throat work, the little flutter at his jaw as he gathered himself. A lie. Daniel's voice came out in a cracked whisper like a prayer. Buddy. Kayla's head whipped back and forth between the two of them. All the color had drained from her face. He doesn't talk, she stammered. Never. He can't. Eli looked at her. Not through her, not past her. The same way he'd looked at me that night at the table when he slapped the fork from my hand. Direct. Unblinking. I talk, he said. His voice was higher than a man's but steadier than a little boy's ought to be. When she's not here. The room seemed to suck in its breath. I listen. He went on, glancing at his father, then back at his mother. When you think I'm a baby. When you think I'm furniture. Daniel sat back like someone had shoved him. His hands trembled in his lap. Eli. Kayla hissed, horror sharpening her features. What are you doing? Sit down. You're confusing everyone. She reached out as if to grab his wrist. Daniel's hand shot out and caught her arm instead. Don't touch him, he said. There was steel in his voice I hadn't heard since he was a teenager. She jerked, startled, and snatched her hand back. Eli took a breath. I could see the fight going on behind his eyes. Years of being punished for sound battling the need to speak. Grandma's pills, he said, turning his face to me. They're wrong. I saw you scrape them. Scrape who? I asked gently. Tell them what you told me. He swallowed. Mom, he said. She takes the real ones from the orange bottles and scrapes them into the garbage disposal. His fingers mimed the movement in the air. She says, oops, if someone walks in. But when it's just me, she laughs. Then she gets the white tub from the high cabinet. No words on it. She uses my medicine spoon to put the powder in the boxes instead. Kayla let out a sharp, humorless laugh. He's making things up, she said quickly. He's autistic. He doesn't understand what he's seeing. He thinks the cartoons he watches are real too. Eli's eyes flashed. I know cartoons aren't real, he said. The words clipped. I know the sound of pills going down the drain. Plink, plink. He tapped twice on the coffee table. I know the smell from Dad's rat stuff in the shed. That's what your powder smells like. Daniel made a strangled sound somewhere between a cough and a sob. Kayla? He said, turning to her. What is he talking about? Right. She cut him off, voice rising. Stop it.
Ellie.
She snapped. You are confusing your father. You don't know the difference between fantasy and, you said. Eli overrode her, louder now. You said, a few falls and the insurance will cover a nursing home. Then we can finally have our own place. His small chest heaved. The room was dead silent except for his words. He took a step toward the sofa, toward his father. You called your friend, he said. You said, if she declines fast enough, can we move her before Christmas? I never. Kayla began, voice climbing into hysteria. And one night, Eli said, his voice dropping, you stood by Grandma's bed. You bent close and said, he squeezed his fingers into fists, nails digging into his palms. One more dose and you'll be out of our hair, promise. Daniel went gray. His knees hit the edge of the coffee table as he tried to stand and failed, landing heavily back on the cushions. Kayla, he whispered. Tell me he's lying. Her mouth opened and closed, but nothing came out that wasn't venom. This is all a setup, she spat. You're confusing a sick child to get what you want. Margaret, how could you drag him into your paranoia? He doesn't understand what he's saying. He understands plenty. I said, my voice low. More than the adults in this house, apparently. She lunged then, sudden as a snake, reaching for Eli. Whether she meant to drag him away or slap him, I'll never know, because Daniel was on his feet this time, intercepting her. I said, don't touch him, he growled. For the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. This is crazy, she said, backing away toward the door. You're all turning on me after everything I've done. I've kept her alive, Daniel. I've kept all of you afloat. And this is the thanks I get. Everything you've done, I repeated. Let's listen to that, shall we? I lifted my hand to the medical alert pendant at my throat and pressed the little recessed button Alvarez had shown me. Across the room in his chair, he nudged a Bluetooth speaker with the side of his shoe. It clicked on with a soft chime. A moment later, the living room filled with Kayla's voice. Clear, crisp, unmistakable. If we don't get some peace soon, Daniel, the stress is going to kill me, the recording said. There was the clink of cutlery, the echo of my kitchen. Honestly, sometimes I think it'd be kinder if your mom just slipped away in her sleep. These pills could do it if she mixes them up again. Silence snapped back into place when the clip ended. The real Kayla stood frozen, eyes wide, lips working soundlessly. That, she finally gasped. That's out of context. I was venting. Every caregiver vents. You record me in my own home. This is illegal. This is. Alvarez rose from his chair. He reached into his inside pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet, flipping it open to reveal a tarnished badge and an old ID. Luis Alvarez, he said. His voice had none of Mr. Lopez's mildness in it now. It was the voice I remembered from inspection days. Former county health inspector. Current consultant to the State Office on Aging. And, as of the last 2 weeks, a cooperating witness with Adult Protective Services in an ongoing elder abuse investigation. Kayla recoiled as if he'd slapped her. Investigation. She scoffed weakly. You can't be serious. I'm the one who called them about placements. I'm the one doing everything. About that, Alvarez said, pulling a folded letter from his envelope. We've got your emails, Ms. Jensen. Asking 3 different facilities whether they can expedite admission if your mother-in-law's mental decline is sudden, and whether her house can be leveraged quickly to cover costs. You've been very proactive. That's not a crime, she snapped. That's planning. Planning can be a crime when you combine it with this, he said. On cue, there was a firm knock at the front door. I didn't bother to hide my grim smile. Come in, I called. The door opened to admit a woman in a navy blazer with an APS badge at her hip and a man in a rumpled sport coat whose eyes took in the scene in one sweep. Margaret Jensen. The woman asked. That's me, I said. I'm Investigator Chen with Adult Protective Services, she said with a nod. This is Detective Morales from the Elder Crimes Unit, Mr. Alvarez called to say your family conference had begun. What is this? Kayla demanded, voice skipping up an octave. You can't just barge into people's homes. We're in the middle of a private legal discussion. You're right, Detective Morales said calmly. Normally we'd make an appointment. But when we have lab reports indicating warfarin analogs in an elder's food, and pharmacy verification that her prescription was never changed to a blood thinner, we tend to move quickly. He held up a folder. My heart bizarrely felt lighter at the sight of all that paperwork. We have evidence from Mr. Alvarez's preliminary testing, he continued, corroborated by an independent lab we rushed this morning, that your mother-in-law's meals contained an animal tranquilizer and an unprescribed anticoagulant. We have bank records showing you moved funds from her pension into an account she doesn't control. We have voice recordings of you discussing helping nature along and a tragic accident. Under our state law, intentional medication tampering that endangers an elder's life is charged as attempted homicide. Kayla laughed, a high, desperate sound. You can't be serious, she said. I was trying to keep her calm. Those were hypotheticals. I adjusted her meds because the doctor is useless. They're turning my own kindness against me, Mom said. Eli spoke up again, his voice cutting through hers. If you died naturally, no one would be mad at her. They'd say she tried her best. He looked smaller now, standing there in the middle of so many adults, but his words landed like stones. Kayla rounded on him, wild-eyed. You ungrateful little, she began. Nuff, Morales snapped. He stepped between them, his presence suddenly very large. "M's Kayla," he said, tone clipped. "Intent doesn't require you to succeed. Thinking through the steps and beginning them is enough. You sought information on institutional placement. You took control of her medications. You altered them without medical authority. You stood to gain financially from her decline. That's not caregiving. That's predation." I looked at her, really looked. At the woman I'd tried so hard to like, the one I'd let into my kitchen, my medicine cabinet, my son's heart. I thought of Eli's pinched arms and whispered threats, of dizzy mornings and incidents. Explained away. "You tried to bury me with my own pills?" I said softly. Her eyes flicked to me, and for a bare instant, all the polish fell away. What stared back at me then was raw and ugly resentment, greed, contempt. "It's not like you had that much longer anyway." She spat before she could stop herself. "I was just—" "Kayla," Daniel choked out. "Stop." He looked shattered. Whatever illusions he'd nursed about his wife had been smashed to gravel in the space of 15 minutes. "Mom," Investigator Chen said, stepping forward with a pair of handcuffs in one hand. "At this time, you're under arrest for attempted homicide of a vulnerable adult, financial exploitation, and felony endangerment of a minor." "A minor," Kayla repeated, stunned. Chen's eyes flicked to Illy. "You threatened to lock your son away in a place where even his grandma couldn't visit if he spoke," she said. "Would take that seriously, too." The cuffs clicked around Kayla's wrists with a sound that, to me, was sweeter than any hymn. As Morales guided her toward the door, she twisted to look back at me, fury blazing. "You can't cut me out," she shouted.
"Your will says I'm in charge!"
"All of this," she jerked her head toward the house, "belongs to me."
"You signed it."
I met her glare with something close to pity. "Not the will that counts," I said. She didn't understand yet, not fully. But she would. And for once, the law was going to be on the side of the old woman everyone assumed was powerless. Kayla's trial date is still months away. But sometimes I close my eyes and hear the judge already. "Bail denied." They used words like premeditated, pattern of behavior, risk to a vulnerable minor. All those heavy phrases that had once lived only in the edges of my nightmares. In the end, they charged her with attempted homicide of a vulnerable adult, financial exploitation, and child endangerment. The prosecutor said on the news they almost never see a case this neatly documented. I had to smile at that. Neatness was the only thing I'd ever been accused of before all this. Her friend at the facility, the one she'd called about, expedited admission. Got a visit from Investigator Chen. Turns out he was just an overworked intake coordinator. Not a co-conspirator, but their board tightened policies anyway. New rules about who can ask about transferring a house. How many red flags have to go up when a relative is too eager to talk about decline? A small ripples from one rotten stone. Within a week of the arrest, I found myself sitting in a calm, carpeted office downtown, facing a probate attorney who looked like he should still be in college. His tie was crooked, but his questions were straight. "So you'd like to revoke any prior powers of attorney granted to your daughter-in-law?" he said, tapping on his keyboard. "Yes," I said. "Effective yesterday. Or 5 years ago if you can manage it." He smiled politely at the joke, then slid a stack of papers toward me. "And you'd like to create a simple living trust?" he asked. "House and savings into the trust, beneficiaries Daniel and Ely jointly." "That's right," I said. "With one condition." He raised an eyebrow. "If any heir is convicted of abusing or exploiting me," I said slowly, reading the clause we drafted with Alvarez's help, "financially or otherwise, they are barred from inheriting under this trust." He nodded. "A local version of the Slayer rule. Perfectly legal. And I wanted to say by name that Kayla Jensen receives nothing from me," I added. "Just so there's no confusion for any judge down the line who might think he's clever." The lawyer's fingers paused over the keys. "I can do that," he said quietly. When I left his office, my house was no longer mine. Not exactly. It belonged to the trust, to the future. But for the first time in a while, that idea brought me peace instead of fear. My home would outlast me without being used as a weapon against me. Daniel moved back in for a while. With a suitcase and a garbage bag of clothes he'd grabbed in a daze the day after Kayla's arrest. He slept in his old room, perched on the edge of his childhood bed, and stared at the ceiling a lot. I don't know who I am without her telling me, he admitted one night at the kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a mug of tea I'd made myself. Every decision, every bill, everything. I just signed where she pointed. You start with your own name, I told him. You write it on something and mean it this time. He started therapy. At first, he complained about the drive, the cost, the waste of time. Then he came home from a support group one night and said, there were other people there, Mom. Men, smart men. They all said the same things I did. I didn't even know. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. We set some rules, him and me. I kept my own bank accounts. He showed me any document he signed that had my name on it, and I had the right to say no. We practiced talking about things without him deferring to some invisible what. That included Kayla. Ely, for his part, bloomed like a plant finally getting sun. The state sent out a new specialist, a woman with soft eyes and a firm handshake. She spent more time talking to Ely than about him, which was a novelty in itself. At the end of her evaluation, she sat with us in the living room. He has social communication differences, she said, choosing each word like she knew how much they weighed. He's had trauma. He's learned to be quiet to stay safe. But he is not incapable. He's bright. He understands far more than anyone's been giving him credit for. We know, I said. He saved my life. Eli started speech therapy, not to fix him but to give him tools. He started seeing a counselor who let him play with toy figurines while he talked about monsters who looked a lot like his mother. His voice grew stronger week by week. One evening, a few months after the arrests, we sat on the front porch as the sun slid down behind the maple trees. The summer air was thick with cicadas. I rocked in my chair. He sat cross-legged on the top step, a book open on his knees. It was a children's mystery, all about two kid detectives who solved cases in their neighborhood. He read a paragraph aloud, stumbling over a word, then trying again until he got it right. The suspects left footprints. He read, triumphant. You're getting good at that, I said. He grinned, gap-toothed. You and me, Grandma, he said. We're like a team. Detectives? I laughed, a real belly laugh that startled a bird out of the hedge. That we are, I said. Though I think you might be the senior partner. I still go see Alvarez now and then. I bring pies because it's the only currency he really trusts. I haven't eaten out in weeks. He joked last time, patting his middle. Not since you scared me straight with that casserole. He grew quieter when I thanked him for believing me. You believed yourself, he said. That's the hard part most people never get to. Sometimes I drive out to the cemetery and sit on the worn bench by Frank's stone. I brush away leaves, straighten the little flag someone from the veterans group stuck there last year. I almost let them talk me into being too old to know what's good for me. I tell him. I almost went along like a good little patient, but the boy you never met pulled me back. The cameras are gone from my house now. Every last nanny device Kayla installed has been ripped out and dropped at the police station as found property. I did keep one small camera, though. It's pointed at my own front door, and the live feed goes to my own phone. Peace of mind, I tell people. On my terms. At church, word got around faster than I could have stopped it even if I'd wanted to. Older ladies started cornering me after service,
Asking, how did you know?
and my daughter-in-law handles my bank card. Should I be worried? I'm no lawyer, but I tell them what I learned the hard way. Read your own labels, ask your own questions. Keep a copy of anything you sign where only you can reach it. And if someone gets huffy when you ask, that's your first red flag. If you remember anything from my story, I'll tell you too. Remember this. Silence is not the same as ignorance. The quiet child in the corner, the old woman at the end of the table. We see and hear more than people think. Greed blinds people. Kayla was so sure of her own righteousness that she forgot the simplest rule of all. You cannot love someone and look at them like a paycheck. In the end, what saved me was not my age or my experience, but the courage of a boy everyone had written off. So let me ask you something. If you suspected your own child or in-law was secretly controlling your medicine or your money, would you be willing to involve outsiders, even the police or social services, to protect yourself? Where is the line for you between keeping the peace, and keeping yourself alive. And have you ever felt someone treated you as weak or confused? Just because of your age, your health, or because you're the quiet one in the room? How did you handle it? Did you speak up? Or did someone else step in the way Eli did for me? If you listened all the way to the end, thank you. It means you care about stories like mine and about people like Eli, who don't always get hurt. If you want more true to life stories about elders standing up to greed, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps these stories reach someone who might really need to hear them. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and if you've ever had to stand up to a helpful family member who was really just helping themselves. I read every single one.